The final bell had long faded, yet inside room 3B, a quiet devotion persisted. The janitor, a man nearing 60 with silver hair and time-worn knuckles, moved slowly from desk to desk. Each surface he wiped carried a gentle reverence, like he was erasing not just smudges but forgotten burdens. The classroom, bathed in amber light from a sinking sun, was still, except for the soft rustle of his cloth and the occasional creak of wood. Outside, the world wound down. Inside, one man remained, unnoticed. But not entirely. Just beyond the cracked door, Principal Reyes, poised and silent, watched. Her face was unreadable. He didn't see her. He didn't know. He aligned each chair with care, sighed, and leaned on his mop. This wasn't a job for him. It was something deeper. Something sacred. And she realized this man had given more to the school's spirit than most who held a title. The janitor stood quietly now, mop propped against the far wall. He looked around the room, not just at the desks, but the silence. To him, it wasn't emptiness. It was peace. Where others heard silence, he heard the voices that had filled this room. Children laughing. A teacher gently correcting a mistake. The scrape of chairs. Eindis. He knew every mark on the floor, every scuff on the wall. These things spoke to him. His hands bore the evidence of 1,000 quiet labors. Yet still, he smiled faintly, as if remembering something. And still, behind the door, Principal Reyes remained frozen, watching, her fingers tight against the frame. Something in her chest ached. She had seen reports, performance stats, budgets, but not this. Not the heartbeat of room 3B. Until now. Her shoes made no sound as she stepped into the room. Still, the janitor flinched. He turned abruptly, face etched with surprise, then embarrassment. Principal Reyes said nothing. She simply looked at the desks. Then at him. He straightened, rubbed his hand over his shirt as if to clean it, and offered a shy nod. "Didn't know anyone was still here," he murmured. She nodded slowly. Her voice was soft when she finally spoke. "Neither did I." For a moment, silence sat between them like a third presence. Then she looked at the clock. 6:42 p.m. "You do this every day?" she asked. The janitor hesitated. "Only when it needs it," he said. Which meant always. She took a breath, and something changed. Respect, unspoken but undeniable, had just been born. Reyes moved closer now, eyes scanning each desk's polished surface. "You don't have to do this," she said gently. The janitor shrugged. "I know." His gaze wandered to a wall where children's artwork fluttered slightly under the air vent. "But I want to." She studied him. Not just his words, but the wear behind them. The sleeves frayed at the cuff, the faded ID badge clipped to his belt. "What's your name?" she asked. "Carlos," he said simply. "Carlos Marquez." She repeated it under her breath. "Carlos. Puck." He went back to adjusting the chairs. "They leave them everywhere," he chuckled. "I like order." She nodded, watching the care in every small movement. It wasn't just tidiness. It was intention. Ritual. Pride. No. That night, long after the lights were turned off and the final door clicked shut, Principal Reyes sat at her desk in silence. The office around her buzzed with the soft hum of an old desktop computer. But she wasn't working. She was remembering. The mop, the cloth, the quiet reverence. Her hands hovered above a glowing keyboard, but her eyes were lost in the image of a man cleaning like a priest, tending an altar. Tomorrow, she thought, people would speak of budgets and benchmarks again. But tonight, she'd witnessed something more vital. A lesson in humility and devotion. She opened her email. To staff. Subject, recognition. And with slow, deliberate keystrokes, she began to write. Morning arrived with the usual blur of activity. Students pouring through gates, teachers juggling coffee and lesson plans, the bell slicing through the air like a starter pistol. But something was different. A small printed notice, taped neatly to the staff lounge bulletin board, drew curious eyes. Recognizing excellence, Carlos Marquez. A few teachers paused, murmured, smiled. Reyes had written it herself. No pomp, no frills, just the truth. She detailed Carlos' nightly devotion, his quiet integrity, and his unwavering consistency. He didn't know about it yet, but whispers started. "He's the janitor, right?" someone asked. "He's the one who stays till nightfall." One teacher added, "He helped me when I dropped an entire tray of supplies last week. Didn't say a word, just smiled and helped." The staff room filled with a rare kind of warmth, not loud or dramatic, but respectful, like people just now realizing a story had been unfolding right under their noses. Carlos walked in just as a teacher quietly stepped back from the board. He carried his mop as always, unaware of the ripple had caused. A few heads turned. A subtle smile here, a slight nod there. Carlos gave a courteous wave and continued toward the supply closet. Reyes, standing in the hall nearby, caught it all. She watched the way others' eyes lingered, not out of pity, but recognition. She stepped forward. "Morning, Carlos." He stopped, unsure why her tone sounded different. "Good morning, ma'am," he replied, eyes dropping modestly. "Have you checked the lounge today?" she asked, voice light but firm. Carlos shook his head. "Not yet." Reyes smiled gently. "You should." He hesitated, then gave a small shrug. He didn't expect much from rooms like that. But as he stepped inside and read the printed words, his lips parted slightly. He blinked once, twice. The mop slipped just a bit in his grip. The students noticed next. Kids are observant, more than adults give them credit for. By second period, word had trickled into classrooms like a gentle breeze. One student in Miss Yang's class raised a hand. "Miss, is it true Mr. Carlos is getting an award?" Miss Yang paused. "Not an award, really, but he's being recognized, yes." A few students exchanged excited glances. In the cafeteria, a group of fifth graders huddled around their lunch trays, whispering ideas. "We should make a card," one shouted. "No, a banner," said another. And like wildfire, the energy spread. By lunch, construction paper, markers, glitter, and tape had all been commandeered. Notes were scrawled with messy but sincere messages. "Thank you, Mr. Carlos. Best janitor ever. You make our school sparkle." The teachers didn't stop them. Reyes, watching from a distance, felt something bloom inside her. This wasn't forced. It was real. And Carlos had no idea what was coming. Carlos pushed his cart down the hallway after lunch, humming under his breath. He turned a corner and stopped in his tracks. The wall in front of him, once bare, was now covered in handmade notes, glittery signs, and tape drawings. "Thank you, Mr. Carlos. You rock. We love your clean classrooms." He stood frozen. The hallway, once mundane, had transformed into a tribute. Behind him, footsteps. "Reyes. They did this on their own," she said gently. Carlos didn't speak. His eyes scanned every crooked letter, every misspelled word. He reached out, hand trembling slightly, and touched one small note. "You make school feel safe," it read. His lips parted, but no sound came. Reyes placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're seen, Carlos. You always have been. We just forgot to say it." His voice, when it finally came, cracked. "Thank you, ma'am. I didn't expect this." She smiled. "You earned it anyway." That afternoon, the school gathered for a brief assembly. Nothing elaborate, just 15 minutes in the multipurpose room. Principal Reyes stood at the podium, a simple mic in her hand. The buzz of students faded as she spoke. "We often recognize accomplishments tied to grades, sports, or leadership. But today, we honor something quieter: consistency, care, pride in small things." She turned to Carlos, seated off to the side, eyes wide. Mr. Carlos Marquez has cared for our school with devotion few ever witness, but all benefit from. The applause came slow at first, then built, like a wave rising. Carlos stood awkwardly, unsure. A boy near the front cheered, then others joined in. A standing ovation. Carlos blinked through sudden tears. "Thank you," he whispered when handed the mic. "I just wanted the kids to have clean desks." And in that moment, everyone understood, it had never been just about desks. It was about dignity. Recognition brought new attention, but not all of it was kind. By Monday, whispers took a sharper tone. In the teacher's lounge, Mr. Dempsey stirred his coffee, watching a group of students wave at Carlos through the window. "They act like he's a saint," he muttered. Ms. Caldwell frowned. "He deserves it." But Dempsey scoffed. "We all stay late. Nobody claps for us." The room grew tense. Jealousy was a quiet poison. It didn't scream, it simmered. Outside, Carlos remained unchanged. He still cleaned the scuff marks near lockers. Still picked up gum wrappers without complaint. But now he noticed the shift. Some teachers stopped making eye contact. Conversations ended when he entered the room. He didn't understand. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked Reyes one morning. Her eyes softened. "No, Carlos, sometimes, when one light shines, others feel dimmed." He gave a tired smile. "I didn't mean to dim anyone." Reyes said, "You didn't, but you did shine." The tension seeped into the halls. Carlos could feel it in the way doors didn't stay open as long, or how footsteps quickened behind him, avoiding small talk. Even some students began to sense it. "Why don't the teachers talk to Mr. Carlos anymore?" one girl asked her friend. "I dunno," the boy replied. "My mom says he's just a janitor." Those words stung, and they reached Carlos eventually, whispered and repeated in echoing corridors. That night, Carlos worked slower. He lingered longer at each desk, not out of duty, but to delay the quiet. He sat in the supply closet for a few minutes longer than usual, rubbing his calloused fingers together. He thought about quitting, for the first time. But as he exited, he found a note taped to the inside of the door. "You're the reason I feel safe here. R." A child's handwriting. His heart caught in his throat. Maybe it was still worth it. Reyes had been watching too. She saw the change in posture when Carlos walked by, the awkward silences that weren't there before. During a staff meeting, she addressed it head-on. "I want to remind us all what leadership looks like. It's not titles. It's example, consistency, integrity." A few teachers looked down. Dempsey crossed his arms. "We're just saying, don't turn a janitor into a martyr." Reyes didn't flinch. "We're not. We're acknowledging a man who has served this school longer than most of us, and better than some." Silence followed. Not hostile, just heavy. After the meeting, Ms. Caldwell caught up with Carlos in the hallway. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "for the weirdness." Carlos smiled faintly. "It's all right. I've worked in places where no one knew my name. At least now they're saying something." His grace embarrassed her. She squeezed his shoulder gently. "You make us better, even when we forget to act like it." The week continued with cautious equilibrium. Carlos returned to his usual rhythm, quiet, steady, invisible by choice. One afternoon, a new voice called out from the back staircase. "Mr. Carlos, wait up." It was Jamal, a sixth grader known more for pranks than praise. Carlos paused, startled. "I made this for you," Jamal said, handing over a small wooden figure. It was carved from popsicle sticks, raw, but unmistakably a person holding a broom. "You made this?" Carlos asked, genuinely moved. "Yeah," Jamal shrugged. "You always clean up after me, so I figured, maybe I can make something for you." Carlos crouched, examining the gift with reverence. "Thank you," he said quietly. "This means more than you know." Jamal beamed. You're like school family. Carlos chuckled. That might be the best compliment I've ever gotten. Behind him, unknown to both, Reyes stood watching again, this time with a full heart and tears she didn't wipe away. Later that evening, Carlos placed the popsicle figure on a shelf in his small apartment, right beside an old photo of his wife. She'd passed years ago. You'd like this place, he whispered to the frame. They're loud, messy, and kind when it matters. He moved to the kitchen, still in his uniform, and poured himself tea. The apartment was modest, worn floors, hand-me-down furniture, but tidy. Every surface clean, every item in place. On the table sat a folder of maintenance requests he'd brought home to study. Not required, but it gave him purpose. He sipped slowly, looking out the window at the city lights. Recognition was nice. Applause, unexpected. But it wasn't why he stayed. It never had been. He stayed because something inside him believed every small act of care could ripple outward. And tonight, looking at that small wooden figure, he believed it again. Rain fell steadily outside as the school bell rang that morning. That morning. Umbrellas bobbed along the sidewalks, and wet shoes squeaked across the linoleum. Carlos arrived early, as usual, mop and keys in hand. But something was different. Urgent whispers, huddled teachers, and Reyes pacing with her phone pressed to her ear. A pipe had burst in the cafeteria ceiling overnight. Water pooled in corners, dripping through tiles, threatening to shut down lunch service. Reyes rubbed her forehead. We can't move everyone into classrooms, not with state inspectors coming this week. Without a word, Carlos stepped forward. I'll handle it. Reyes turned, caught off guard. Carlos, that's not. He raised a hand gently. It's okay, I've fixed worse. He retrieved his tools and vanished into the flooded room. While others debated solutions, Carlos was already rolling up sleeves, laying down towels, assessing the damage not as a problem, but as a promise to keep. Inside the flooded cafeteria, Carlos moved with purposeful rhythm. He checked every connection, sealed leaks with practiced hands, and ran industrial dryers to beat back the spreading water. His jacket was soaked through, but he didn't slow down. By noon, the space was nearly restored. Reyes stepped in cautiously, eyes wide at the transformation. You did all of this? She asked. Carlos stood, wiping his hands on a rag. Mostly. I'll mop up the rest. She looked around. The dry tables, the dehumidifiers humming, the trash bins catching final drips. Carlos, this would have cost us thousands. You saved us. He smiled. It's not about saving money, it's about keeping things running, for the kids. Reyes exhaled deeply. You just saved inspection week. Carlos chuckled softly. Then let's hope the floor's dry before the suits arrive. They both laughed. For once pressure gave way to shared pride. The next day, the inspection team arrived. Clipboards, diked, blazers, cold expressions. Reyes led them through the school like a commander guiding a foreign delegation. Carlos watched from the hallway, arms crossed over his coveralls, silent but alert. As they neared the cafeteria, Reyes felt her chest tighten. Would they notice the freshly sealed ceiling? The faint water stain near the drain? The lead inspector paused. You've managed recent repairs? Reyes nodded. Our custodian responded overnight, prevented further damage. The inspector raised a brow. Impressive. Carlos, standing quietly nearby, gave a small nod. He didn't need applause. Just that moment of acknowledgement. After they left, Reyes found him wiping down a window near the entrance. They said your name in the report, she told him. First time I've ever seen that for a janitor. Carlos shrugged modestly. Good. That means they saw the work. She smiled. They saw the man too. That evening, a student approached Carlos by the bike racks. It was the same girl who'd once asked why teachers stopped talking to him. She held a small notebook. I wrote about you for my writing class, she said, cheeks pink with nerves. Carlos knelt to her level. You did? She nodded. My teacher said to write about someone important. I picked you. He took the notebook gently, flipping through pages filled with uneven lines, colorful drawings, and one sentence underlined in red crayon. Mr. Carlos makes our school better with his hands and his heart. He blinked, words caught behind a tight throat. This is beautiful, he whispered. She grinned. I want to be like you when I grow up. Carlos touched his chest. That means more than you know. Behind them, Reyes stood beside the school doors again, heart swelling. The school had needed a leader. And they'd found one, with a mop, pipe. Inside the school that night, the halls were empty again. Carlos walked slowly through them, lights dimmed, floor polished smooth as glass. He paused outside room 3B, hand resting on the doorknob. Inside he flipped on the light. Desks in perfect rows. Chairs aligned. The room felt like a chapel. He stepped to the front, just for a moment, and looked out as if addressing invisible students. Take care of your space, he whispered. Take care of each other. He didn't need applause anymore. He didn't need reports or banners. This was his ritual. His sermon. All. He locked the door behind him, keys jingling softly. Outside, the rain had returned, but it didn't feel cold. Just honest. Kind of rain that blesses what it touches. As he stepped out into the night, he carried no spotlight, just a mop, a smile, and the quiet dignity of a man who served not for recognition, but because he believed it mattered. Weeks passed and the days slipped quietly into one another. Carlos remained the same. Steady, humble, focused. But the school had changed. There was a new attentiveness in the way people moved, in how students cleaned up after themselves, in how teachers acknowledged each other's efforts. Reyes noticed it first. The culture had shifted, not because of a program or a memo, but because of a man who swept the floors like sacred ground. One morning, a new teacher approached Carlos near the library. You're the one everyone talks about, she said with a smile. Carlos paused. They talk? He asked, half laughing. Only good things, she assured him. I just wanted to say thank you. You set the tone for this place. Carlos nodded slowly, touched. We all said it. I just clean up the parts that get overlooked. She looked at him with newfound respect. He wasn't just part of the school. He was its heartbeat. That same day, Reyes met with the school board downtown. A long table. Suits. Water bottles lined up like little gods. She presented her routine report. Numbers, safety checks, improvements. But then she paused. I want to share something outside the spreadsheet, she said. A few board members shifted, curious. We talk a lot about infrastructure, staff-to-student ratios, but we don't always see the people behind those systems. She reached into her folder and held up a photo. Carlos wiping desks in room 3B. This man has done more to shape our culture than any policy I've ever enforced. Silence followed. Then one board member leaned forward. Why haven't we heard of him before? Reyes smiled faintly. Because he never asked to be seen. There was a pause, then a murmur of agreement. Something had shifted. Not just in the room, but in their understanding of what really holds a school together. Carlos had no idea what was happening behind closed doors. He just knew the water fountain in Wing C was dripping again. With his toolbox in hand, he knelt down and adjusted the valve. He hummed a soft tune, one his wife used to sing when the world felt heavy. As he worked, a boy lingered nearby. You fix everything, the child said simply. Carlos looked up, smiled. I try. The boy squatted beside him, curious. Is it hard? Carlos considered. Not the fixing, the noticing. That's what people forget to do. To notice. The boy nodded, as if absorbing a secret. Moments like this fed Carlos more than lunch breaks or overtime pay. They reminded him he wasn't just repairing pipes, He was holding space, teaching presence, leaving behind more than clean floors. Yeah. As the drip finally stopped, the boy grinned. You're like a quiet superhero. Carlos chuckled. If I am, then quiet is my power. A week later, the announcement came. Reyes called Carlos into her office, small, neat, sunlit. There's something you need to know, she said. The district is creating a new honorary position. They're calling it Cultural Steward. Carlos blinked, confused. What's that mean? She smiled. It means your name will go in the handbook. You'll mentor new hires, train custodians. But more than that, you'll help guide the tone of how we treat one another. He stood frozen. I don't have a degree, he said. You have something better, Reyes replied. Lived truth. He sat slowly, hands trembling. I don't know what to say. She leaned in. Just say you'll stay. He looked around the room, the bookshelf, the clock, the framed student art, and nodded. I'll stay. A quiet reverence passed between them. She didn't see a janitor. She saw a pillar. And now, so did the world beyond their walls. That Friday, the school bell rang as usual. But this time the front steps were crowded, not with students rushing home, but with staff and children holding balloons and a large banner. Congratulations, Mr. Carlos, our first cultural steward. As he exited the building with his mop cart, Carlos stopped mid-step. The applause hit him like a wave. He froze, overwhelmed, then slowly raised one hand. The kids ran up, hugging him, handing him cards. Teachers clapped. Reyes stood near the entrance, eyes shining. One student yelled, "Speech!" Carlos laughed nervously. I'm better with mops than microphones, he joked. But then he paused, cleared his throat. I never asked to be noticed. I just wanted to make things a little better each day. If that helps someone else, then that's enough for me. Silence followed. And then, not just cheers, but tears. Because everyone knew he hadn't just made the school cleaner. He'd made it whole. Carlos sat in the faculty lounge, a place he'd only passed through before. Now, there was a chair with his name on it, a small engraved plaque on the backrest. Teachers filtered in slowly, unsure at first, then more confidently. Miss Caldwell handed him a cup of tea. You belong here, she said simply. It wasn't loud. It wasn't official. But something had shifted. Conversations that used to trail off when he entered now continued. Someone asked his opinion about a student conflict. Another thanked him for fixing a wobbly table. It was subtle, but meaningful. Carlos wasn't on the outside anymore. He was woven in. When Reyes passed through later, she saw him laughing with two younger staffers and paused. She didn't interrupt. She simply smiled and kept walking. Integration doesn't always come with a parade. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in shared stories over breakroom tea, and a nameplate that says, "You matter here." Later that week, Carlos hosted his first training session for new custodial staff. 3 newcomers sat in folding chairs inside the janitor's storage room, which Carlos had cleaned and rearranged like a workshop. He stood with a mop in one hand and a quiet smile. This isn't just about cleaning, he began. It's about presence. People won't always see you, but they'll feel the results of what you do. He showed them how to care for the tools, how to move efficiently through classrooms, how to read the energy of a space. One trainee raised his hand. What if people don't respect us? Carlos looked him square in the eye. Then you respect the space anyway, and eventually they'll respect you too. It wasn't just training, it was passing down a philosophy. One rooted in quiet pride, dignity, and deep human regard. They weren't just workers now. They were caretakers of something sacred. Outside, the seasons were shifting. The maple trees lining the playground were turning gold and crimson. Inside room 3B, the desks were still clean. The floors gleamed. And one corner now held a new addition, a plaque, dedicated to Carlos Marquez, for service beyond duty. Carlos discovered it one morning, blinking in disbelief. Reyes had made sure it appeared without fanfare, just like him. You. A few students peeked through the window, giggling. He found it, someone whispered. Carlos touched the plaque, fingers tracing the etching. No cameras. No crowd. Just a quiet moment of gratitude embedded in the very space he had once restored alone. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. His smile said it all. Room 3B, once a forgotten classroom, was now a monument, not of gold or glass, but of devotion. A place where dignity had been polished, one desk at a time, until it gleamed. One quiet Saturday, Carlos returned to the school, not out of obligation, but habit. He walked the halls slowly, nodding at familiar corners, pausing to straighten a tilted poster. In the library he found a reading program flyer he'd helped laminate last spring. He smiled. Legacy wasn't just what people remembered, it was what they lived in. He sat in room 3B for a while, letting the silence settle around him like an old friend. Later, he visited the boiler room, checked a few pipes, tuned a thermostat. Before leaving, he passed by the wall of drawings the kids had once made for him. A few new ones had joined, crayon hearts, stick figures labeled Mr. C. He stood there longer than he expected, hand resting on the artwork. No speeches. No bells. Just a man and the echoes of what he'd built. Without noise, without demand. Just care. As autumn deepened, Reyes called Carlos into her office once more. She handed him a sealed envelope. "They're honoring you at the city awards next month," she said. "You'll be representing the school district." Carlos looked stunned. "Me?" She nodded. "You've already represented us every day. You just haven't stood on the stage yet." He opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a formal invitation, printed on thick ivory stalk. His name, in bold lettering, nestled among titles and honors. Carlos swallowed hard. "I don't have a suit," he whispered. Reyes smiled. "You will." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the moment thick in the room. It wasn't about trophies. It wasn't about pride. It was about recognition. Genuine, overdue, and deeply earned. Carlos folded the letter carefully and placed it into his pocket. "Then I guess I'll need to iron my best shirt," Reyes said. "We'll make sure it shines." The City Awards night arrived with crisp air and glittering streetlights. Carlos stood in the hallway of the auditorium, suit freshly pressed, tie a little crooked. Reyes adjusted it with a practiced hand. "You look sharp," she said. "Unfamiliar," he smiled nervously. The sound of applause filtered through the heavy doors. "You're next," a coordinator whispered. Carlos swallowed, heart pounding. As he stepped onto the stage, the lights blinded him momentarily. But then he saw them. Rows of students, staff, families, all rising to their feet. The announcer's voice echoed, "For extraordinary service and quiet leadership, Mr. Carlos Marquez." The applause surged. Carlos approached the podium, hands trembling slightly. He cleared his throat. "I never expected this," he began softly. "But I'm grateful." A long pause. Then he added, "Service isn't about being noticed. It's about noticing, and I've been lucky to notice so many wonderful people along the way." The crowd quieted, absorbing his words. After the ceremony, the foyer buzzed with chatter and congratulations. Cameras flashed. Local reporters leaned in with notepads. But Carlos didn't drift toward the journalists. Instead, he moved to the students clustered near the punch table. "You looked cool up there," one boy said, eyes wide. Carlos laughed. "You think so? I was terrified." Laughter followed. "What are you going to do next, Mr. Carlos?" another asked. He paused, pretending to think. "Well, tomorrow I'm fixing a door hinge in room 6A. The kids giggled again. "You're a legend," one girl whispered. "You're the soul of our school." Carlos' smile faltered for just a second, emotion rushing up like a wave. "I don't know about that," he said, voice husky, "but I'm proud to be a part of it." Around him, Flashier honorees posed for press. But no one radiated more presence than the janitor surrounded by the lives he quietly shaped. The following week at school, life resumed its usual pace, but everything felt different. Teachers greeted Carlos with genuine warmth. Students called his name in the halls with pride, not curiosity. And in room 3B, a framed photo from the awards now hung beside the plaque. But it wasn't about the ceremony anymore. It was about the legacy unfolding. During a reading session, a young student told her teacher, "When I grow up, I want to be like Mr. Carlos. He makes everything feel safe." That line spread through the school like sunlight. Reyes overheard it and felt something click inside her. Dignity, she realized, had never needed a microphone. It had simply needed to be seen. Carlos passed her later that day, mop in hand. She nodded. "You're changing the world," she said. He chuckled, "one hallway at a time." And maybe that's exactly how change was supposed to happen. Quietly. Repeatedly. Autumn leaves tumbled across the playground as Carlos stood beneath a maple tree during recess. Jamal ran up, clutching something behind his back. "Close your eyes." Carlos obeyed with a chuckle. "Now open." In his hands was a small medal made from a bottle cap and ribbon. "You already got a fancy one, but this is from us." The cap read, "World's Best Everything." Carlos blinked, lips trembling. "I'll treasure this more," he whispered. The children clapped, giggled, swarmed him in a group hug. Teachers watched from a distance, some misty-eyed. Reyes stood beside them, arms crossed, her voice quiet. "He didn't just clean this place, he restored it." One teacher asked, "What do we do now?" Reyes said without hesitation, "We follow his example." Carlos held the handmade medal to his chest. Not because it was shiny, but because it meant he'd truly been seen. Not as help, but as heart. Years from now, no one may remember the date of the award ceremony. They may not recall the title, cultural steward, or the formal invitation. But they will remember how the school felt. How it smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and care. How someone always noticed the crooked chair. How kindness echoed louder than announcements. And how a man with a mop taught them what dignity really meant. Carlos never stopped working. He never stopped noticing. He remained a steady presence long after the world moved on to the next headline. His name didn't make national news, but it made its mark in every life he touched. And one day, when Reyes finally retired, she walked those halls one last time, stopping in room 3B. She ran her hand over his plaque and smiled. "He never knew it," she whispered, "but he was the soul of this school." And the bell rang, one final time.